This is Change Your Mindset Podcast, the podcast that helps change your life by helping change the mindset of the 99% into the 1% mindset. Here's your host, Adrian Gomez.
Welcome back, everyone, to Change Your Mindset Podcast. I'm your host, Adrian Gomez. So in this podcast, we'll be talking about the difference between a brick and mortar versus an e-commerce store. So if you plan on opening a store, or maybe that's something you want to do, obviously you will be selling a product. So there's two ways you can do it, or you can do both if you like, totally up to you. So if you're selling goods, products, whatever merchandise, if you choose to take that route as a business owner and decide to go that as an entrepreneur, just for example. So when you have a brick and mortar store, what it is a physical location where people can obviously walk in, go shop, whatever they do, like a mall, stuff like that. They can physically be at your store. So that would be a brick and mortar store. E-commerce store is when you have your store online. So some people don't even have a brick and mortar, like a physical location. Their store is just online. So you can just buy online and sell to how many people you want, thousands of people, whatever. But obviously you're going to have to step out the product every day. So that's the difference between the two. And some people combine them. Some people do both. They have a physical brick and mortar and they also have an e-commerce store. So they have both. So I'm going to just be going over the pros and cons of each one. So we'll start with the brick and mortar store. So say if you just have that one store. That store is one location, and it's a physical store. So wherever you put that store, what's surrounding you will be your foot traffic. So however many people that are in your city or, multiple cities around you, that will only be your foot traffic. That will only be your customers. So just something to think about. That will only be your customers. You won't have any people online if you just do brick and mortar and just a physical location and no e-commerce. So that would just be your customers. So that could be a couple hundred, couple thousands, who knows? It just depends on your location. And another thing to take into consideration on that is you're going to have to be paying for overhead. So when you're paying for overhead, you're going to be paying the rent, however much it costs for you to have your business in that area, whatever it may be, a couple of thousands or however much it costs for you to have your business there on that property. That's something to think about as well. Another thing is you might have employees. Obviously, unless you decide to be there by yourself the whole day, however days you're open, maybe it's just you. Maybe you're the only person, you don't have any employees. You do all the work. That's a possibility, but more than likely you probably have employees, and that's going to be another expense. So that's just something to think about. That's already multiple expenses. You have a rent you have to pay. You have employees. So that just adds up as well. And another thing to think about is if you have a physical location, you have an open to close. Maybe you open 5 days out the week. Maybe you open 7 days out the week. So since you have a physical location, more than likely, since you're going to be starting that business, you will have to physically be there. Unless you have someone running it for you, which is possible, but obviously if you start a business, you're the one who's going to have to be there because you're the one who puts in the work and you're going to want to see it grow, so you got to control everything. So you're going to have to physically be there. So whenever the store is open, more than likely you should be there. So you will have to be there, and it will be like a semi-job, but you're going to have to be putting in more hours because it's your own business, so it's going to take up more work and more time. But obviously, in the long run, it can pay off, or it may not even work out. But that's the part of, being an entrepreneur. So those are majority. It sounds more like cons and pros. The pro side of it could be you're interacting with your customers. So obviously you get to talk to your customers. You get to see them in person. You can build relationships. Maybe you want to go to neighborhoods and promote your business. Obviously, there's more interaction. And, some people like interaction one-on-one instead of obviously online. So that's obviously a pro. You can have that interaction with your customers. Maybe you can get feedback, or maybe they can tell other people about your business because you talk to them, or you can go out and promote yourself. So that's one pro you can do as obviously a brick and mortar. Another thing to take into consideration, since it is a physical location, for example, when obviously COVID happened, a lot of businesses went out of business because everything was shut down. They weren't getting any customers. So if something like that ever happens again, you possibly can't go out of business because you will be shut down. If they decide to do a lockdown, or if something else happens, that's just something you take into consideration, that since it's a physical location and you're relying on people to come into your store, if something like that's going to prevent them from coming into your store. And a lot of people went out of business because obviously having no money coming in, you can't pay for your overhead, your products. Maybe you had employees, you can't even pay for your own wages. So that's just something to take into consideration. And that's very serious too, because I mean, who knows what can happen in the future, and if something like that, hopefully it never does happen again, but if it does, that's just something to think about. And another thing also to think about is theft. There obviously is a lot of theft going on in the world nowadays. Unfortunately, crime's skyrocketing in certain areas of the country. So you gotta think about that as well. That people can just grab your product and might just run out or walk out, or they can steal your product. And unfortunately, nowadays in certain areas of the country, they either get a ticket or they get slapped on the wrist. Unfortunately, and either they just get re-released into the city and they might just come back and do it again. And obviously a lot of businesses do suffer from a lot of theft, so that's just something to think about. Obviously, having a physical location, you will have people that will be stealing from you in your store. So those are some examples to think about if you decide to open up a brick and mortar store. So we move to e-commerce. E-commerce is obviously very huge because it is an online store. So when you think about an online store, and if you only have an online store, say if you're just doing it from home, a lot of people just do it from home. So if you're doing it from home, you will save a lot of money, because if you think about it, compared to a brick and mortar physical location, you're not paying for overhead, because if you're doing it from home, you're not renting out any places. And then also whatever area from your home you're using, that will also be a tax write-off. There's a certain part of your home, depending on the area used, will be a tax write-off on your form. So that's one thing to think about. If you're a small business, you might not have any employees. That's another expense that can be eliminated. But if you're a big e-commerce store, maybe you do have employees. And maybe if you're not doing it at home, maybe you do have a big e-commerce store. To decide to have a big e-commerce store, you will obviously have to get a physical location because you need bigger inventory. So that's some things to think about. Also, since you're online in the internet, everyone uses the internet, your customers will be on the internet. So you have thousands to millions of people that can be your potential customers. So compared to a brick and mortar, whatever physical location, that surrounding area will only be your customers. When you have an e-commerce store, your customers can be thousands and millions, because you're pretty much doing possibly worldwide, because everyone has the internet, everyone knows how to use the internet. And if you sell your product, you can have potential customers from anywhere. So you can have a lot of customers just basically off of e-commerce. So that's just another example between the two. So also another thing about e-commerce, since it is only online, if your primary source is online, if you don't sell in person, if something ever happens and the internet shuts down, if something, I don't know, crazy happens, a war, whatever it may be, or maybe electricity goes down for months, or you never know, if the internet goes down for whatever reason, there goes your source of income, because you won't have any customers anymore because your internet's down, and that's what you rely on since it's an e-commerce store. So if the internet goes down, your customers go down. As well as being an e-commerce store, since you do sell online, you will be shipping out your products to whatever postal service you decide to use. So whenever you sell something, you majority of the time you will be at the post office, probably Monday through Friday. So you will be at the post office pretty much every day. So that's something to take into consideration if you don't have a close postal service next to you. Or maybe you can, if your postal service does allow it, they can pick up the products for you and maybe they can take it to the postal office and it'll be shipped out from there. So just take that into mind that you will be dealing with the post office very regularly because you have to ship out your items to wherever you're sending them to. Maybe it's in the same country or maybe it's worldwide, wherever it may be. So that's something to think about as well. So let's just say if you do have an e-commerce store and you're doing it from home, which is very popular nowadays, the big thing about that also is a very big pro, in my opinion, is since it's online and you're not a brick and mortar, since you don't have to physically be at your physical store. Since if you only have an e-commerce store, you can do whatever you want technically because you don't have a physical store. Your store is at your house. So basically you can clock in, clock out whenever you want and pretty much do whatever you want basically because your store is online and you don't have a physical location. Obviously you have to ship out your items, but you have more freedom than you would obviously having a physical store. So in my opinion, that's a big pro because, I mean, who wouldn't want to do whatever they want, right? Because like I said, if you have a brick and mortar, you're going to have to physically be at that store from open to close. So that's a big pro and con. That is something to think about as well. So let's just say if you have both, it's very possible. A lot of people do nowadays. It's very possible, but you got to think about it because they both have pros and cons. So one might outweigh the other, why the other doesn't. So if you do both, you have a physical location. I mean, you can have the best of both worlds technically, but like I said, if you have a physical location, you're going to have to be there. So, I mean, if you sell online, you get more customers. So it's a big pro and con because, like I said, you're going to have to combine both of them. And when we just talked about them separately, you're going to have to do a lot more physical work, obviously, because, like I said, you're going to have an overhead if you're doing both. More than likely, you're probably going to have employees, but obviously, you're going to have more customers because you have your customers locally around you, and then you have the customers on the internet. So that's just something to think about. But you might not have as much freedom because you have a physical location and you have to be there. So you can't really do whatever you want unless you take certain days off, or if you have like a Monday through Friday and you're off weekends. But that's totally up to you because maybe weekends are your busiest days. So maybe you have to work weekends. You might take Monday, Tuesday off, depending on what you sell or what you do. So that's something to think about as well. If you do this for a long time, and obviously if your business is great, people are buying products, you're making good money and you're still involved in the business, you can make your business cash flow, obviously, because if you're in the business, that's active income because you have to physically be working. Passive income, obviously, that'll take you out of the business. So the only way you take yourself out of the business if you replace yourself. So obviously you have to make sure you're making money. Obviously it has to be good profit that you can bring somebody in, maybe a manager, and that manager takes what you do and does it. So obviously you need a good manager because maybe that manager might put you out of business, or maybe that manager might be even better than you. It might even make your business even better. So if you get the right exact person and you put them into your business, now you can take yourself out of the business. Now it's not active income anymore. And then it starts to become passive because now you're not working for the business no more. You already have the business running. You have people working for you now if they decide to do that. And now you're outside the business. And now you just have money coming in. Obviously, you probably want to look over finances and make sure you're profitable and all that and keep an eye on it. But now you're not physically in the business no more. Obviously, that takes a while and, it takes time. But if your business is doing that well, that's passive income for you. Whichever route you decide to take is totally up to you. Like I said, there is pros and cons to both sides. Whatever you decide to do, that's up to you. If you want to start a business and, start producing stuff like this, it does take a long time to grow. It is a lot of work, and you probably be working more hours than having a typical job. But the benefits are that if you are successful, and hopefully your store doesn't close down, and I wish you the best if you decide to take this route, and I wish you obviously amazing wealth. But if you do decide to make it and your business is very great, the sky's the limit. Who knows how much you can be making? Obviously, you'll be making way more than your job will ever make you. So you just gotta weigh the risk and the reward. But like I said, if it was easy, then anyone can do it. A lot of small businesses go out of business, unfortunately, because sometimes they open a business and it's not what people want. I hear a lot of people say, oh, if you open up a business and what you like, oh, you'll never work a day in your life. But what if you open up a business that's something that you like, but your customers don't want it and you go out of business because of that? So if you're going to open up a business, you got to make sure it's something that's in demand, something that people actually want and people are willing to spend money on. I mean, in my personal opinion, if I was opening up a physical business, which I don't have a physical business, I have an e-commerce business, but if I would open up a physical business, it'd be something in demand, like something people would always need or something people always want or always spend money on. Because if you have something that's always in demand, people will come to you every week. So if you think about, for example, two easy examples, guys get their haircuts, right? So every week or every 2 weeks, they're going to get a haircut. So obviously your hair is going to grow no matter what. So you need a haircut. So barbershops are probably never going to go out of business because people's hairs are always going to be growing and they're always going to need haircuts. And for the women's side, nails, your nails are always going to grow. Girls love getting their nails done. And if you love getting your nails done, girls are always going to be there every single, I don't know how long, couple weeks or months. They're always going to get their nails done, pedicures. That's a business that's been around forever and seems like it's not going away because that's something that's always in demand. And your nails, like I said, nails are always going to grow. So that's just going to be constantly happening over and over. But then people want to also take the food route, which it could be very good and could be very bad because you need to sell a lot because usually your margins are pretty small. So if your margins are small and you're not selling that much, it's hard because it's a volume game. You have to sell a lot of food to make a lot of money. And that's a very hard business unless you incorporate alcohol, but you do different licensings and all that stuff. But obviously alcohol is very expensive and people put that into the business and most of the time it does work out. But if you're just doing food, it's a lot of competition because there's so many food places. Majority of the time, most foods are pretty much all the same. So you would have to stand out somehow. But like I said, the margins are very small because you profit not that much on food. You just have to sell a lot of food to profit. So that's a hard business to start. But if you decide to start a business, that's totally up to you. But you need to make sure whatever business you do start, it's something that people want, something that's always going to be in demand, and people will constantly keep coming back over and over. Because people think you can start a business doing anything, which is technically true. But if you start a business that your customers don't want to buy products from, you will go out of business. So you need to start a business that's always in demand. So if you think about it, if you go out and if you see people waiting in lines or, stuff like that, stores, whatever it be, a lot of people, see what they sell. Maybe they have good products, good food, whatever it may be. And just put that in ideas that businesses you can start. Because if there's a lot of people there, there's a reason why there are a lot of people there. And people are spending their money at that business. In general, there is a lot to think about when starting a business. Whether you want to do a brick and mortar or a e-commerce store or both. And once you decide to do one or the other or whatever you decide to do, you need to start thinking about the products or what you're going to sell, how you're going to promote it, how to get your customers in. Obviously, if you want to do social media to get the word out to people locally or whatever it may be, it's a lot of work you have to put into it. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of risk because a lot of small businesses do not make it. But there is a very big reward because at the end of the day, sky's the limit how much money you can make. and you'll make more money maybe doing that than having a job, obviously, because having a job, we all know you have a set pay. Having a business, you might make a little bit of money, you might make a lot of money, but that's part of capitalism. But you have the opportunity to do so. And you also always constantly have to be thinking ahead when you have a business, because what if your business is doing great and people buying products, or maybe you're selling food, whatever it may be. Maybe in a couple of years things change. Maybe people don't want your product no more. Maybe people don't want your food no more. Or maybe we hit a recession or a depression that's really, really bad and people don't have any money to spend. Obviously that's your income, so that's something to think about as well. This is just another example. Obviously, if you want to start a business, you can be the 1%, end up being in the 1% category. Or if you're comfortable and you're fine having a job, you'll stay in the 99% and you will work till you retire. So if you want to take that big risk and put in the work over and over and over and be consistent, it's a lot of work, trust me. But the rewards obviously outweigh the risk at the end of the day if you put in the work. This is just something to think about. Maybe you don't even want to start a business or do something like this. I'm just giving you some examples of pros and cons of having a brick and mortar versus an e-commerce store. Maybe you put them together and have both. So just giving you ideas if you decide to take that route. If not, maybe you can go into real estate or investing. There's a lot of other ways you can make money, and obviously it's totally up to what you guys decide. It's like making podcasts like this, give you an idea, something you want to do, maybe something you don't want to do. Totally up to you, but this is what this podcast was about. Something different. It's giving you some ideas. So thank you guys for listening to this podcast. If you want to share it, maybe you want to share it with somebody that wants to start a business or do something like this, similar. Give them ideas, and maybe that's to help them out. If you guys subscribe to the podcast, wherever you listen to, appreciate it. If you don't have to, if you don't want to, totally up to you. But I appreciate you guys listening to the podcast. Thank you as always, and change your mindset to change your life. Take care of yourself. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to Change Your Mindset podcast. Be sure to tune in every week for a new episode. As always, change your mindset to change your life.